My best friend ran to me, crying hysterically. She claimed her husband was a violent, sex-obsessed psycho who wouldn't even leave her alone during her pregnancy. Looking at the dark purple bruises covering her skin, my heart ached with a mixture of pity and rage. Without hesitation, I paid out of my own pocket to hire the most ruthless divorce lawyer in the city for her. But the moment she turned around, she got pregnant with their second child. To make matters worse, she told her husband that I was the one trying to sabotage their beautiful marriage. To get revenge, her husband dragged me into a dark alley, brutally assaulted me, and tortured me to death. And my best friend? She stood right there, ignoring my desperate pleas for help, calmly recording the entire thing on her phone. Afterward, she uploaded a carefully edited version of the video online, playing the ultimate victim. I can't believe my best friend tried to seduce my husband while I was pregnant. With endless, suffocating hatred, I died. But then I woke up. I was reborn, back to the exact moment she came to cry to me. This time I just smiled at her and said, "He wants to get intimate with you even when you're pregnant? Oh my God, he is literally obsessed with you. He loves you so much. Chloe, I don't care what anyone says. I am definitely divorcing him this time." My best friend Ruby's screeching voice echoed in my ears. I shook my pounding head, trying to force myself awake. When I opened my eyes, the first thing I saw was Ruby, standing in front of me with her clothes half off, showing off a body covered in nasty purple bruises. Her face was contorted with anger. Staring at this eerily familiar scene, I pinched my thigh as hard as I could. The sharp sting shot through my leg. It was real. I had actually been reborn. In my past life, Ruby had come to me crying just like this, stripping off her clothes to show me her injuries. She had screamed, "Chloe, Marcus is a literal beast. I just gave birth, and he forced me to do that to him while I was still healing." Seeing her battered body, I had felt so much pain and anger for her. I spent my own savings to hire the best divorce lawyer available. But instead of leaving him, she got pregnant again almost immediately and sold me out to save her own skin. To please Marcus, she even set up a trap to force me to marry his creepy cousin, Justin. I fought back with everything I had and managed to escape. But in the end, a furious Marcus dragged me into a filthy alleyway. He beat and assaulted me until I took my last breath. All the while, Ruby stood there, holding her phone, recording my slow death. She completely ignored my screams. Later, she edited the footage and posted it on Instagram to play the victim. I can't believe my best friend tried to seduce my husband while I was pregnant. Overnight, I became the internet's favorite punching bag, the homewrecker, who tried to steal her bestie's husband. Meanwhile, Ruby used her sob story to gain millions of followers, making a fortune off of sponsorships. The suffocating terror of being tortured to death still gripped my chest. Instinctively, I clenched my fists, digging my fingernails into my palms to hide the burning hatred in my eyes. Seeing that I hadn't responded for a while, Ruby snapped. She raised her voice, yelling at me, "Chloe, are you even my friend? I got beaten to a pulp, and you're just standing there daydreaming?" She marched over, grabbing my chin and forcing my head up. She made me look directly at her bruised body, repeating every word slowly. "Chloe, I said I'm divorcing him. I am divorcing him. Did you hear me?" She stressed the word divorce over and over again. I immediately understood her hidden agenda. She didn't actually want a divorce. She just wanted me to validate her anger and offer her financial support, so she could use me as leverage to threaten Marcus. She chose me because she knew I was a soft-hearted fool. In my past life, I hadn't seen through her sick game. I had stupidly thrown my money and energy into helping her, and it cost me my life. Remembering this, I swallowed the bitter hatred rising in my throat. I casually brushed her hand off my chin and said in a flat tone, "Are you seriously throwing a tantrum over such a minor issue? Didn't you say he was your soulmate?" Ruby froze. Then her voice went up an octave. "This is domestic violence. Domestic violence happens once, and then it happens forever. How can you call this a minor issue?" Her voice carried a note of panic. I sneered in my mind. So she did know that abusers never change. She and Marcus had had a whirlwind romance. She hadn't even met his parents before she decided she absolutely had to marry him. As her best friend, I couldn't bear to see her ruin her life, so I begged her to slow down. But she just sent me a wedding invitation when she was already visibly pregnant. I was furious, but looking at her pregnant belly, I had no choice but to accept it. I even bought her an expensive designer necklace as a wedding gift. And the moment she got beaten, I tried to save her. In return, she destroyed me. How utterly pathetic. Just then, a frantic, heavy pounding echoed from my front door. Bang! 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 The violent noise made the walls shake. I looked at the rattling door, then at Ruby's guilty, pale face. I knew exactly what was happening. This was my new apartment. No one knew the address except Ruby. The beast slamming against my door could only be Marcus. I didn't know what Ruby had told him to make him this furious, but it definitely wasn't anything good. I forced down the disgust rising in my chest. A second before the door was kicked open, I seized my chance and yelled at Ruby at the top of my lungs. What? You want to divorce Marcus over something so stupid? Didn't you tell me he's the love of your life? He wanted to be intimate with you right after you gave birth. Doesn't that prove how obsessed he is with you? Honestly, Ruby, you need to grow up. You're a married woman now. I screamed as loud as I could, making sure Marcus could hear every single word through the door. Ruby was completely stunned by my sudden change of attitude. She stared at me, her eyes wide with utter disbelief. But the moment Marcus burst through the door, a look of smug relief washed over her face, her eyes instantly filling with adoration. I looked up. Sure enough, Marcus walked in holding a heavy tire iron. He glared at me, swinging the iron bar back and forth. It looked like he was ready to crack my skull open at any second. This was only the third time I had seen him. The first time was at their wedding, which had been too rushed for me to get a good look at his face. The terror of my past life flashed through my mind, making my blood run cold. I clenched my jaw, forcing a calm smile onto my face, and said to Ruby, "Couples fight all the time. See, Marcus is already here to take you home." Hearing my words, Ruby let out a sweet, triumphant laugh. Her ego inflated instantly. She said haughtily, "I guess you're right. Tough love is still love. If he didn't care about me, why would he only hit me and not anyone else?" I was completely dumbfounded by her twisted logic. I glanced at her face. She tilted her chin up proudly, refusing to look at Marcus, waiting for him to beg for her forgiveness first. But Marcus's eyes were locked onto her exposed, bruised body. In the next second, he lunged forward, grabbing her and kissing her violently. He muttered, "Didn't I show you enough love? Fine, let me show you how much I love you right now." Ruby put up a half-hearted struggle, which only turned Marcus on even more. Watching them practically get it on right in front of me made me want to throw up. To stop them, I deliberately swept a glass cup off the table. Crash. The loud noise finally made them freeze. Ruby's face was flushed, her legs shaking, but her eyes were filled with smug satisfaction. Marcus, on the other hand, glared at me with a dark, murderous expression. Under his terrifying gaze, I trembled slightly but forced myself to speak. "This is a newly renovated apartment. The fresh paint fumes are toxic. It's bad for conceiving a baby boy." My voice shook. I wasn't sure if Marcus would buy it, but I had to take the gamble. Fortunately, Marcus just gave me a chilling look, then scooped Ruby up in a bridal carry and walked out. He looked as desperate as a starved animal. Ruby clung to him with a smug, seductive smirk. The moment they left, the adrenaline drained from my body. I collapsed onto the floor, my knees weak, staring at the empty doorway. My mind spun rapidly as I began to plan my next move. Without my interference this time, Ruby got pregnant with their second child much faster than in my previous life. She posted her ultrasound photo all over Instagram, acting like a clueless, pampered princess. "My amazing hubby is so strong. Got me pregnant again in a flash. And guess what? It's a boy this time." She attached photos of a massive diamond ring alongside some highly inappropriate, semi-nude pictures of her and Marcus. It was nauseating. I knew for a fact she had given birth via C-section only 3 months ago. Her uterus hadn't even fully healed, yet she was bragging about being pregnant again. It meant Marcus had forced himself on her almost immediately after she got home from the hospital. Graphic, bloody medical scenarios flashed through my mind. I felt sick to my stomach. Just then, my office door was slammed open. Ruby and Marcus barged in, looking frantic. "Chloe, you have to help me. Those incompetent doctors at the clinic actually told me to get an abortion. This is my son they're talking about." Ruby's eyes burned with a vicious hatred, so intense it felt like she wanted to kill me on the spot. I looked at the couple, then at the ultrasound report on my desk. I rubbed my aching temples. I deeply regretted not taking a personal day today. As an OB/GYN, any decent doctor looking at her chart would advise an abortion. Getting pregnant 2 months after a C-section was practically a suicide mission. It was basic medical common sense. But it was obvious that neither Ruby nor Marcus cared about medical science. They only wanted one thing: to bring this baby to term, preferably a boy. I decided to keep my tone strictly professional. "Looking at the ultrasound, the fetus is currently healthy. However, regarding your maternal health..." Before I could finish, Marcus cut me off with an ecstatic shout. He swept Ruby into his arms, yelling in excitement, "Baby, did you hear that? The baby is healthy. My family finally has an heir. My mom's psychic was right. This one is definitely a boy." Ruby gave him a strained smile, then looked at me with a desperate, pleading gaze. She whispered under her breath, "Chloe, I just had a C-section 2 months ago. My body can't handle this." I almost laughed out loud. Why didn't she think about her body when she was busy letting him use her? I ignored her silent plea and said coldly, "I can only confirm the fetus is viable. If you want to know about your own health, you need a full physical workup. Do you want me to schedule that?" Seeing my cold indifference, a flash of pure hatred crossed Ruby's eyes. She opened her mouth to speak, but Marcus cut in again. Baby, your bestie literally just said the baby is healthy. What are you hesitating for? Don't you want to give me a son? His voice dropped, laced with a dangerous threat. Ruby flinched. Instinctively, she tried to shift the blame onto me to appease him. She clung to Marcus's arm, whining like a child. Babe, of course I love you, and of course I want to give you a son. It's just, Chloe kept telling me before that getting pregnant so soon after a C-section would kill me. She shot me a smug, triumphant look. Sure enough, Marcus snapped. He kicked my heavy office desk, flipping it completely over. Before I could react, I was thrown to the floor along with the desk. But Marcus wasn't done. He slowly walked toward me, his towering shadow looming over my fallen body. The skin on my hands was scraped and bleeding, throbbing with sharp pain. I looked up at the security camera on the wall, quickly calculating the angles in my head. As Marcus stepped closer, I positioned myself in the camera's blind spot. Then, with all the strength I could muster, I kicked him squarely in the groin. My kick landed perfectly. It was enough to send him crashing to the floor, howling in agony. Watching him writhe in pain brought a rush of pure satisfaction to my chest. Ruby rushed to his side, glaring at me like a feral beast. Chloe, you bitch. What did you do to Marcus? The hatred in her eyes was so raw. It was almost hard to believe. We had grown up together. We used to share everything. We were inseparable. Yet she had dragged me into hell twice. Neither in my past life nor in this one had she ever cared about my life. The ghost of being assaulted still haunted my skin. Even after taking countless showers since my rebirth, I still felt dirty. I had nightmares every single night. I couldn't hold back my rage anymore. I stood up, walked over to her, and blocked the camera with my body. I grabbed her chin, forcing her to look me in the eyes. Hurts, doesn't it? But this pain is absolutely nothing compared to what I had to go through. At this moment, all my mercy was gone. Only hatred remained. I didn't care about the consequences anymore. In this life, I was going to drag them both straight to hell. Ruby was clearly terrified by my sudden madness. She quickly helped a groaning Marcus up and scurried toward the door. Before leaving, she spat out a weak threat. Just wait, Chloe, you'll pay for this. I casually brushed the dust off my clothes, completely unfazed. Bring it on. Let's rot in hell together. I thought that after that incident, Ruby and I were officially done. Yet, she actually had the audacity to show up at my apartment again, heavily pregnant. This time, she brought a few of our former college classmates with her. I couldn't throw her out in front of everyone, so I swallowed my disgust and let them in. As soon as she sat down, Ruby began proudly showing off her brand new bag. She raised her voice, making sure I could hear her from the kitchen. Marcus bought me this Birkin bag. It cost $70,000. He said it's a reward for being such an obedient wife. I'm just lucky. I've got the wide hips to carry his heir. Our former classmates squealed in envy, praising her for marrying a rich, handsome guy, begging her to introduce them to some of his wealthy friends. Ruby basked in their flattery, boasting that she would take everyone out for a lavish seafood dinner. But my suspicion only grew. The others might not know, but I knew very well that Marcus wasn't some rich heir. He was a high school dropout from the projects who survived on welfare. Even if he had landed a decent job, there was no way he could afford a $70,000 bag. Then, Ruby leaned in closer to the girls, whispering mysteriously, "Honestly, making money is so easy. As long as you're good at pleasing wealthy men, forget about designer bags. Luxury cars and penthouses are yours for the taking." The other girls squealed with excitement, joking about their own bodies and how fertile they looked. I was highly curious about this easy money scheme, so I kept my ears open. But Ruby suddenly glanced toward me and lowered her voice to a whisper. I immediately realized why she had brought them here today. She wanted to use my apartment and my professional status as a doctor to legitimize whatever shady business she was running, recruiting these girls into her scheme. I brought out a plate of sliced fruit and joined them, acting casual. What kind of money-making scheme are we talking about? Count me in. I softened my tone, pretending to be naive and greedy. Ruby's eyes lit up. She pulled me down to sit beside her, running her hands over my body, nodding in approval. "Chloe, you're a natural. With your body, you'll make an absolute fortune." I had always been naturally covier than most girls. To find out what she was up to, I forced myself not to recoil from her touch and smiled. "Really? I guess I'll have to follow your lead to get rich, Ruby." My submissive act highly pleased her. She immediately pulled out her phone and called Marcus, telling him to come over and pick us up. Our classmates were practically drooling with envy, begging Ruby to introduce them to rich guys just like Marcus. It made my skin crawl. I excused myself to go change. Watching Ruby brainwash those girls in my living room, I knew this business was deeply illegal. Actually, the reason Ruby and I became best friends wasn't just because we grew up together. It was because I had always sensed a darkness in her, a darkness that mirrored my own. It was a dangerous thrill, and I loved it. I smiled, fingering my necklace, and quickly typed a message on my phone. Once finished, I hit send. Right on cue, Ruby's impatient voice yelled from the living room. Chloe, hurry up. We can't keep them waiting. When we walked down to the street, Marcus was waiting in a rusty, dented van. He sat in the driver's seat, heavily chain-smoking, his face dark and menacing. Our classmates had never met Marcus in person before. Seeing his sketchy appearance, they immediately looked disgusted, holding their noses as they whispered to Ruby. Ruby, is that your driver? Why is he so dirty? Ruby's face turned bright red with embarrassment. She tried to cover it up quickly. Why do you care what the car looks like? As long as he takes you to make money, who cares? But looking at the sketchy van that didn't match Ruby's trophy wife persona at all, the girls hesitated. Nobody wanted to get in. Looking at them, I knew for sure that whatever Marcus and Ruby were doing, it was highly dangerous. I decided to play along and give them an out, while pushing Ruby further into the trap. Ruby, if they don't want to make money, forget it. Let them stay poor. We don't need them. I walked over and linked my arm with Ruby's. Encouraged by my support, Ruby sneered at the girls. Chloe is right. You guys are destined to be poor. Don't go then. I patted Ruby's arm while subtly signaling the other girls to leave, but they ignored my warning, standing there, torn between fear and greed. Just then Marcus got out of the van. He threw his cigarette butt onto the ground. He marched straight toward us, and without a word, slapped Ruby hard across the face. Bitch. Stop wasting my time. You can't even handle a simple task. The force of the slap sent Ruby spinning, and she knocked into me. Instead of fighting back, Ruby immediately knelt on the pavement, begging for forgiveness. Marcus ignored her. He began walking around me, his filthy, lustful eyes scanning my body like he wanted to strip me right there. Under his creepy gaze, I forced myself to look terrified, lowering my head in submission. Seeing my submissive act, Marcus lost interest and grunted. The other girls were terrified, trembling in a corner. Marcus looked around to make sure there were no security cameras. Then, he grabbed the girls one by one and violently threw them into the back of the van. He shoved me and Ruby in last. No one dared to breathe, terrified of triggering his explosive temper. The girls who had been dreaming of quick cash were now crying silently. I frowned. This was an undeveloped area with zero surveillance. If anything happened to us here, the police wouldn't even know where to start looking. But the trap was set. I could only pray that Ethan had received my text. The drive was brutal. The bumpy mountain roads made everyone quiet down. The initial excitement was entirely gone, replaced by pure dread. One of the girls began to gag from motion sickness. She whimpered to Ruby in the front seat. Ruby, please tell your husband to pull over. I'm going to throw up. But Ruby ignored her, busy feeding Marcus chips. She replied carelessly, just throw up in the car. Who cares? Some of the girls began to complain, but Marcus just sped up, ignoring them completely. I had prepared myself for this, so I remained calm. I pulled out tissues and water from my bag, passing them to the girls, whispering for them to stay quiet. They calmed down slightly, clutching the water bottles. I stared out the window as the van climbed deeper into the desolate mountains, my heart pounding. I kept touching my necklace, drawing comfort from it, before closing my eyes. After about 4 hours, the van finally screeched to a halt outside a remote estate. The sudden stop jolted us awake. Before we could figure out where we were, 2 men wearing black ski masks threw the back doors open. They brutally dragged us out, snatching our phones and bags, and stuffed gags into our mouths. We were forced down a dark corridor, and shoved into a massive iron cage. Everyone was crying, desperately regretting their greed. I looked around. The cage was already filled with dozens of other young women, all staring blankly at the floor. The iron door slammed shut with a heavy, industrial metallic thud, locking the sound of weeping inside the concrete room. The air was thick with the suffocating smell of bleach, old sweat, and damp earth. Heavy fluorescent tubes flickered overhead, buzzing like dying insects, casting harsh white light across dozens of terrified faces. There were at least 30 women locked inside the cage. Some were college students like my former classmates. Others looked like young mothers or runaways who had been lured by false job listings or fast cash schemes. My classmates collapsed onto the filthy floor, clutching each other and weeping uncontrollably. Chloe, one of them whimpered, grabbing my sleeve with cold, shaking hands. What is this place? Where did Ruby take us? I didn't answer. I reached into my coat, my fingers gently brushing the small pearl pendant on my necklace. Underneath the cheap faux pearl was a military-grade micro-GPS beacon, linked directly to Ethan Vance, the chief of the Regional Human Trafficking Task Force. Ethan and I had been working together in secret for 2 weeks. In my past life, after Marcus killed me, the police had uncovered a massive underground surrogacy and organ harvesting ring linked to his sketchy mountain trips. Back then it was too late for me. This time, I had contacted Ethan the moment I realized what Marcus was up to, giving him every detail I could gather. My text to Ethan before leaving the apartment hadn't been a cry for help. It was the signal to initiate the trap. Footsteps echoed down the long, concrete hallway outside. Heavy, rhythmic, and deliberate. A key turned in the heavy iron lock, and the door swung open. Marcus walked in, accompanied by two men dressed in pristine white medical scrubs and a tall, elegant man in a tailored charcoal suit holding an iPad. The man in the suit glanced at the cage like an auctioneer evaluating livestock. A fresh batch, Marcus boasted, stepping up to the iron bars, his voice dripping with greasy pride. 8 healthy girls straight from the city. No medical history, young, high fertility. Beside him stood Ruby. She was no longer wearing the gag or handcuffs. She stood outside the cage, wearing a fluffy white coat, holding a brand new Louis Vuitton handbag. She looked down at the weeping girls inside the cage with a sneer of absolute superiority. See, Ruby purred, leaning against Marcus's arm. I told you I could get them. Here, babe. My college friends were so easy to trick. A little flattery, a fake designer bag, and they practically begged to get into the van. The classmates inside the cage froze. They raised their tear-stained faces, staring at Ruby in absolute disbelief. Ruby, one of them gasped, her voice breaking. You set us up? You sold us. Ruby tossed her hair back, laughing maliciously. Sold you? Please. You were the ones blinded by greed. You wanted easy money, didn't you? Well, now you're going to make plenty of it, for my husband. She turned her eyes onto me, her face twisting into a hideous, triumphant smirk. And you, Chloe, Ruby sneered, stepping closer to the bars. You always acted so high and mighty. You thought being a doctor made you better than me? Look at you now. You're just another piece of meat in a cage. I didn't flinch. I sat calmly against the cold concrete wall, looking back at her with eyes as still as a frozen lake. Is that so, Ruby? I asked softly, my voice smooth and devoid of fear. And what makes you think you're any different? Ruby's smile flickered for a fraction of a second, but she quickly pressed her body against Marcus, puffing out her chest. I'm Marcus's wife, she boasted proudly. I'm carrying his son. I'm the mother of his heir. I get $70,000 bags, and you get locked in a cage. The man in the charcoal suit stopped tapping his iPad. He slowly turned his cold, calculating eyes onto Ruby. Marcus, the man in the suit said, his voice flat and terrifyingly calm. Who is this woman? Marcus didn't hesitate for even a second. My wife. But don't worry, boss. She's useless now that she's brought the stock. Her second C-section scar is completely ruined, and her blood work is a mess. Ruby's smug expression froze on her face. And Marcus? What are you talking about? Marcus shoved her forward, grabbing her by her hair and pushing her toward the man in the suit as if she were nothing more than a stray dog. Boss, Marcus grinned, his eyes gleaming with pure cold-blooded greed. She's carrying a male fetus, 7 months along. If the client wants a preborn male package or fresh stem cells, we can harvest her next week. Her eggs are shot, but her organs are still worth at least 200 grand. The silence inside the subterranean holding room was absolute. Ruby stood frozen on the concrete floor, her luxury handbag slipping from her limp fingers hitting the dirty ground with a dull thud. She stared at Marcus, her pupils dilated to tiny black pinpricks, her breath coming in ragged, terrified hitches. Marcus, she whimpered, her voice trembling so violently she could barely speak. Babe, you're joking, right? It's me, Ruby. I'm your wife. I gave you a daughter, and I'm carrying your son right now. Marcus didn't even look at her. He pulled a cigarette from his pocket, lit it, and blew a cloud of gray smoke directly into her face. Wife. Marcus let out a harsh, mocking laugh. Ruby, do you really think a high school dropout like me kept a broke, whiny bitch like you around because of love? You were just an easy lay who brought me fresh girls whenever I needed to hit my quota. He stepped closer, tapping his heavy boot against her knee. You brought me 3 college girls last year, and now you brought me 5. Today, including your precious doctor friend. You served your purpose. But that belly of yours is a ticking time bomb. The doctor says your uterus is so thin it could burst any day. You think I'm going to waste money on your hospital bills? Ruby's face went completely white. She stumbled back, hitting the iron bars of the cage behind her. Inside the cage, the classmates who had been weeping moments ago stared at Ruby with a mixture of horror and cold, vengeful satisfaction. Karma. One of the girls spat out through her tears. You sold us out, Ruby. And now he's selling you. No. It's not true. Marcus loves me. Ruby screamed, her voice rising into a hysterical, screeching pitch. She lunged forward, clutching Marcus's jacket with wild desperation. Marcus, tell them you love me. I gave you everything. I betrayed Chloe for you. I helped you kill. Smack. Marcus slapped her so hard her head snapped to the side. The force of the blow sent her spinning, and she crashed heavily onto the hard concrete floor. "Shut your mouth, bitch," Marcus snarled, kicking her violently in the ribs. "Don't scream in front of the boss." Ruby curled into a fetal position on the dirty floor, holding her swollen stomach, groaning in agony. Fresh, dark blood began to seep through the fabric of her white trousers, spreading across the stone floor like a crimson oil slick. Her unhealed C-section incision from 3 months ago had finally given out. Under the physical trauma, the man in the charcoal suit frowned, stepping back to avoid the blood pool. "Messy," the boss muttered, checking his luxury watch. "She's hemorrhaging. If she dies here before the buyers arrive, the smell will ruin the fresh stock in the cage. Get rid of her." Marcus pulled a heavy metal pipe from his belt, his eyes glinting with murderous intent. "Got it, boss. I'll finish her off and dump her in the incinerator." Ruby looked up from the pool of her own blood, her tear-filled eyes wide with pure, un adulterante terror. She stretched a trembling, blood-stained hand toward the cage toward me. "Chloe." Ruby wept, her voice a desperate, pathetic rasp. "Chloe, save me, please. You're a doctor. Save my baby." I stood behind the iron bars looking down at her. In my past life, when she came to me with fake bruises, I spent my own money to hire her a lawyer. When she set me up, I still tried to warn her about her health. And in return, she watched Marcus beat me to death while recording it on her phone. Now, she lay in her own blood, discarded like garbage by the very monster she had worshipped. I didn't step back. I didn't cry. I looked her straight in the eyes and smiled. A cold, beautiful, razor-sharp smile. "Save you, Ruby?" I asked softly, my voice echoing clearly through the room. "Why should I? Didn't you say tough love is still love? He's just showing you how much he adores you." Ruby's eyes filled with wild, hysterical despair. "Chloe, I'm sorry. I'm sorry," she wailed, clutching her rupturing stomach as fresh gushes of dark blood soaked the floor. "I was wrong. I shouldn't have helped Marcus. I shouldn't have framed you. Please. I don't want to die." Marcus stepped up, raising the iron pipe over his head, his face contorted into a feral mask. "Shut up, you noisy bitch." "Stop," I called out, my voice sharp, authoritative, and ringing with the unmistakable command of a seasoned physician. Marcus froze, turning his head to glare at me through the cage bars. "What did you say, little doctor?" I looked past Marcus, addressing the man in the charcoal suit. "If he crushes her skull with that pipe right now, her uterine artery will spurt blood across this entire unventilated room," I said coldly, using precise medical terms. "Given the high ambient humidity down here, bacterial decomposition will begin within 40 minutes. The airborne pathogens will contaminate the open wounds and mucous membranes of every woman in this cage, ruining your entire stock before your buyers even land at the airstrip." The boss stopped in his tracks. He eyed me with newfound interest. "You're an senior resident at the university hospital," I replied cleanly. "If you want to keep her alive long enough to harvest her organs or maintain the sterility of this room, her uterine rupture needs to be clamped immediately. Otherwise, you're losing $200,000 in organ value and risking millions in stock contamination." The boss turned a cold glare onto Marcus. "Put the pipe down, you idiot." Marcus gritted his teeth, lowering the pipe, glaring at me with lethal hatred. "Boss, she's just trying to stall." "Unlock the cage," the boss ordered one of the guards in scrubs. "Let the doctor out to patch her up. Put 2 armed men on her." The iron lock clicked. The cage door swung open. My classmates grabbed my arm in terror. "Chloe, don't go out there. They'll kill you. Stay inside and keep quiet," I whispered to them, my voice firm and reassuring. "Help is already here." I stepped out of the cage. The 2 armed guards grabbed my shoulders, pushing me toward the medical cart. Near the wall, I quickly scanned the tray. Sterile gloves, surgical clamps, scalpels, heavy gauze, and local anesthetics. I picked up a heavy pair of stainless steel arterial clamps and a scalpel, hiding them deftly in the inner lining of my coat sleeve, a trick I had practiced 100 times during emergency surgical rushes. I knelt beside Ruby. The floor was slippery with her blood. Her face was gray, her lips turning blue. A shock set in from massive internal bleeding. "Chloe," Ruby whimpered, her hands grasping at my shoes. You're saving me." I leaned down, my gloved hands pressing hard against her ruptured abdomen. The intense pain made her scream, but I didn't soften my grip. "Saving you," I whispered directly into her ear, my voice so low that only she could hear it. "No, Ruby. I'm keeping you conscious. I want you to be wide awake for everything that happens next." Ruby blinked through her tears, horror dawning in her eyes once again. Just then, a faint, rhythmic vibration hummed through the concrete floor beneath our knees. It wasn't the sound of the generator. It was the heavy, thundering pulse of Low-flying tactical helicopters approaching the mountain ridge above us. I looked at my watch. Midnight. Exactly 2 hours since my signal was sent. What's that sound? The boss asked, his eyes darting toward the ceiling, his hand reaching into his suit coat for a gun. Before Marcus could answer, the heavy concrete ceiling above us exploded in a blinding flash of white light and a deafening roar that shattered every glass vial in the room. Boom! The flashbang grenade detonated directly above the main access shaft. High decibel shockwaves tore through the room, blinding the guards and throwing Marcus onto his back, his iron pipe clattering across the floor. The heavy steel doors at the end of the corridor were blown off their hinges by a breaching charge, collapsing inward with a violent crash. Police. Federal Task Force. Don't move. Dozens of heavily armed SWAT officers in black tactical gear poured through the smoke, laser sights cutting through the haze like crimson needles. Drop your weapons. Hands on your heads. The syndicate guards in scrubs panicked, reaching for their sidearms, but were instantly dropped by precise, silenced bursts of gunfire from the tactical team. Clear left. Clear right. Securing the cage. Ethan Vance was the first to breach the holding room. Dressed in a dark tactical vest, his assault rifle raised, his eyes razor-sharp. He swept the room until his gaze locked onto me. Chloe! Ethan shouted, rushing toward me, using his body to shield me from the crossfire. Are you hit? I'm fine, I said calmly, standing up from the blood-slicked floor, wiping the sterile gloves off my hands. The captives inside the cage are all unharmed. The ringleaders are right there. The boss in the charcoal suit tried to scramble toward a hidden escape hatch near the generator, but 2 SWAT officers tackled him to the ground, pinning his arms behind his back and snapping heavy steel cuffs onto his wrists. Got the primary suspect, an officer yelled. Securing the perimeter. Meanwhile, Marcus was crawling frantically across the floor through the smoke, trying to reach a fallen guard's submachine gun. His face was contorted with insane, desperate rage. He knew that if he was caught alive, his life was over. I'll kill you. I'll kill you all. Marcus screamed, his hand reaching the trigger of the automatic rifle. He aimed the barrel straight toward my chest. Chloe, watch out. Ethan yelled, raising his rifle. But before Ethan could pull the trigger, I moved. I pulled the heavy stainless steel arterial clamp from my sleeve, the one I had taken from the surgical tray, and lunged forward with blinding speed. I slammed the sharp, pointed steel tips directly into the inner side of Marcus's right wrist, puncturing the radial artery and severing the median nerve in one clean, surgical strike. Crack. Marcus shrieked, a sound of unimaginable agony echoing off the concrete walls. His fingers instantly lost all neurological control, going limp. The submachine gun clattered uselessly onto the floor. Blood spurted from his wrist, soaking his face as he rolled on the floor, clutching his ruined hand, howling like a dying beast. I stood over him, looking down at his thrashing body with cold, unblinking eyes. That's for the alleyway, Marcus, I whispered softly. The room was quickly secured by federal agents. Medical teams in orange suits rushed into the subterranean bunker, unlocking the iron cage and guiding the weeping, traumatized victims out into the fresh night air above. My college classmates ran out of the cage, throwing their arms around each other, sobbing in relief. When they passed me, they looked at me with deep, profound gratitude and awe. Chloe, thank you. If you hadn't stayed calm, we would have been killed. I nodded politely to them, handing them heavy wool blankets brought by the paramedics. In the center of the room, emergency EMTs were frantically treating Ruby. Her face was gray, her pulse barely palpable. They had placed her on an emergency stretcher, hooked up 2 4 bags of saline, and were prepping her for immediate airlift to the trauma center. Marcus was pinned against the wall in heavy hand and leg restraints, a tourniquet wrapped tightly around his bleeding wrist. His face was covered in dirt and sweat, his eyes filled with terrified, pathetic defeat. As the officers began dragging Marcus toward the exit, he caught sight of Ruby, lying on the stretcher. Ruby! Marcus yelled, his voice desperate, trying to play his last card. Ruby, tell them you're my wife. Tell them I didn't kidnap you. Tell them we're just running a business. Ruby opened her eyes slowly on the stretcher. The pain from her ruptured uterus was unbearable, but the pain in her chest, the absolute, crushing realization that she had been nothing more than a disposable pig to this man, was far worse. She looked at Marcus, her eyes filled with a dark, toxic, unadulterated hatred that mirrored my own from my past life. Officer, Ruby rasped, her voice wet with blood as she pointed a shaking finger at Marcus. He ran the ring. He forced me, he kidnapped those girls. He has a flash drive hidden in his boot with all the client records. Marcus's eyes went wide with shock. You bitch. You treacherous fucking whore. I'll kill you. Take him away, Ethan ordered coldly. 2 heavy tactical officers shoved Marcus forward, dragging him out into the dark hallway, his screams of rage and curses echoing into the distance until they were cut off by the heavy blast doors above. Ethan walked over to me, handing me a bottle of water and a warm coat. "You were incredible, Chloe," Ethan said softly, his storm gray eyes filled with deep respect. "If you hadn't maintained the tracker signal and kept the syndicate occupied, they would have evacuated the secondary site before our helicopters reached the ridge." I took a sip of the cold water, feeling the crisp mountain air fill my lungs. "Is the evidence clean?" I asked. "Impeccable," Ethan confirmed, tapping a thick file folder. "The flash drive in Marcus's boot, the CCTV footage from your apartment, the hidden cameras we installed outside the estate, and your medical documentation of Ruby's injuries. It's an ironclad RICO case. Marcus, his boss, and every buyer on that list are going away for life." I looked over at Ruby's stretcher as the paramedics lifted her toward the elevator. Her eyes met mine one last time through the fog of her fading consciousness. She didn't ask for help. She didn't offer a fake apology. She simply lay there, shivering, broken, facing the absolute, inescapable ruin of her own creation. 3 months later, the trial of the century concluded at the regional federal courthouse. The news had dominated every major channel for weeks. Underground human trafficking ring dismantled. Over 40 victims rescued in mountain raid. Marcus Vance was convicted on 26 federal counts, including human trafficking, illegal organ trade, attempted murder, racketeering, and conspiracy. He was sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole, plus 40 years in maximum security federal custody. His creepy cousin, Justin, the man Ruby had tried to force me to marry in my past life, was also swept up in the investigation, arrested for conspiracy and illegal transport of victims, and sentenced to 15 years in state prison. As for Ruby, she survived the emergency surgery, but the damage to her body was catastrophic. The severe uterine rupture and massive hemorrhage forced surgeons to perform a total hysterectomy, removing her uterus, ovaries, and the 7-month-old fetus. She was rendered permanently infertile, her health ruined, her body scarred beyond repair. Furthermore, because of her active role in luring her college classmates into the trafficking ring for financial kickbacks, she was tried as a co-conspirator. She was sentenced to 25 years in a high-security women's penitentiary. On the day of her sentencing, I sat in the front row of the public gallery, wearing a crisp tailored suit, looking utterly immaculate. Ruby was brought into the courtroom in orange scrubs, heavy chains clanking around her ankles and wrists. Her hair was thin and gray, her skin sallow, her face aged 20 years and 3 months. When the judge read the 25-year sentence, Ruby collapsed onto the defense table, weeping uncontrollably. She turned her head, her tear-filled eyes finding mine through the wooden partition. I didn't yell. I didn't mock her. I simply lifted my hand, adjusted my diamond necklace, the one I had bought with my own hard-earned money, and gave her a small, polite nod. The guards dragged her away, her desperate sobs echoing through the marble courtroom until the heavy doors slammed shut. Spring arrived in the city, painting the trees along the hospital avenue in soft shades of cherry blossom pink and crisp green. I stood by the window of my new office on the 5th floor of the university hospital. A plaque on my oak desk read, "Dr. Chloe Reed, head of obstetrics and gynecology." At 28, I had become the youngest department head in the hospital's history, praised by the medical board for my clinical excellence, courage, and dedication to patient safety. A quiet knock sounded on my door. Ethan Vance walked in, wearing a sharp gray suit, holding 2 cups of fresh espresso. "Morning, department head," Ethan smiled, handing me a cup. "Morning, chief," I chuckled, taking a sip of the warm, rich coffee. "What brings the task force chief to my floor today?" "Just checking on my favorite partner," Ethan said, leaning against the edge of my desk, his storm gray eyes warm and bright. "And seeing if you're free for dinner tonight. No mountain raids, no wiretaps, just steak and wine." I looked out the window at the bright, open sky stretching endlessly above the city towers. The nightmares of the dark alleyway were gone. The ghost of my past life had finally been laid to rest. I turned back to Ethan, a genuine, radiant smile breaking across my face, the first true smile I had worn in 2 lives. "I'd love that," I said smoothly. I picked up my white coat, slipped it over my shoulders, and walked toward the door, stepping out into the bright, warm sunlight of a brand new day.